Everyone goes through mental challenges, emotional challenges. We all have them. We've just been hiding them for a very long time, and now it's time to actually be honest and open about it.
How did meditation change you?
I know my personality, I would have very easily gone down substance abuse. Far more acceptable for a woman to go to a close friend and say, hey, I'm actually going through some things. And guys tend to rub it off and just say, oh, I'm fine. We have to be clear on what we mean by meditation. And I think because sometimes it can just sound like a very complicated word. Expectation minus reality is going to determine how happy or how sad you are. We wake up every day feeling empty.
Right.
And we spend the rest of our day trying to satisfy that beginning of mental health issues. Is your sense of disconnection.
I got to pay this bill and I got to pay that bill. So maybe because they don't have to worry about any of that anymore, it's easier to sort of be spiritual.
They realized it still didn't fill their happiness void. As a generation, we're talking a lot more about our mental health, and yet I can almost imagine our grandparents saying, what are you talking about? What are you going through that compares to what we went through?
A lot of people have had very traumatic experiences thanks to people who have harmed them, harassed them, who represented a faith. How do we get those people back aligned with the wisdom?
Unfortunately, we've seen that far too many times.
Hi, Satpal. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be back.
It's good to have you back.
Thank you.
I guess we touched on a lot of topics last time you were here, but I always feel like there was more to our conversation. That's what I felt like anyway, and I think the viewers probably felt the same.
Yeah, I felt we just scratched the surface.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to go deeper.
Let's do it.
Awesome. When you introduce yourself usually to people, how do you do that? If somebody doesn't know you, how do you introduce yourself and what you do?
It's been a long time since I've introduced myself to someone who doesn't know me. It's a weird thing to say that, but most of the time people who kind of come up to me are familiar with the work that I do. I think depending on whether they're from the Punjabi Sikh community or not, if they're not, I generally introduce myself as a meditation teacher who does all his teaching on YouTube.
Right. That's a good one.
That's a simple sort of entry point into that.
And I'm sure they have a lot of questions following up.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of questions today because we're going to touch base on mental health. It's very close to my heart. And the reason I think it's close to my heart is we don't talk enough about it in the community. We have started to. The conversations are happening. People are more aware. But I almost feel like when you don't have language for something, it's hard to talk about it and articulate it. We touched on it last time you were here as well, right? Yeah. So vocabulary-wise, it's a very limited vocabulary to even describe what you're going through, isn't it? That's a big challenge for Punjabis.
That is definitely a big challenge for Punjabis, but we're starting to see some real progress being made. And I think there's the first step, which is people are more accepting of the fact that everyone goes through mental challenges, emotional challenges. We all have them. We've just been hiding them for a very long time, and now it's time to actually be honest and open about it.
Right. I think as soon as we start seeing mental health as part of our bodies and it's natural, the stigma might go away. Because right now it's sort of like, if you're going through mental health issues, there must be something wrong with you, obviously. Yeah. That's just how we are raised. And that's how we've heard about mental health issues, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of unlearning there as well, I find.
I think for me, the term that I prefer is actually I'm working on my mental wellness and mental well-being. So it sounds to me less like a medical condition and more like self-care.
Right. Yeah, and self-care is something that we keep hearing about now. Yeah. Meditation is a huge part of it. How did meditation change you when you started it and where you are in your journey now?
Meditation, for me, when I first started at the age of about 19, 20 years old, was more of a self-exploration and a curiosity. I wasn't trying to fix any part of myself. I wasn't going through any sort of personal traumas. I came from a pretty reasonable, healthy family life, stable life, which I'm always very grateful for now. Looking back, I think it's such a big deal that you just have a stability in the household. So for me, meditation was just real curiosity that if you closed your eyes and sat with yourself, your mind was doing things that you weren't aware of before. And I actually think that's one of the first really important steps towards mental well-being is introspection. Having an understanding, why does my mind do the things that it does? And maybe are there little techniques that we can use to overcome some of the things that our mind seems to naturally do?
Right. If you didn't have meditation, what are some of the challenges you think you would have gone through? Just knowing yourself, probably the best.
That's a very important question and something that I've reflected on. I know my personality.
Yeah.
And I know that I have an addictive personality. And I'm extremely grateful for meditation because there have been times where, like everyone has, really tough moments. I know my personality, I would have very easily gone down substance abuse had it not been for meditation. I still do that to some extent with sugar. I still kind of have I like to say that, I've got a sweet tooth. But at some points, I even had to admit to myself that I think we can't call it a sweet tooth anymore. We have to call it a sugar addiction. And then I started to realize, well, if I can get addicted to sugar, I could have got addicted to other things. And I really think spirituality and meditation has saved me so many times from the ups and downs of life.
Sugar addiction. I can relate to that so much. Substance abuse and alcoholism, very prevalent in our community. And sometimes I wonder if there is a relation when it comes to suppressing your emotions, especially when it comes to men and not being able to express your emotions openly.
Yeah.
And masculinity and the definition that we have of masculinity, especially the man of the house, doesn't get to show his vulnerabilities and emotions openly. I wonder if there is a correlation.
There definitely is a relationship between not being able to open up, not being able to have a trusted friend that you can speak to. And I actually think we don't talk about men's mental health enough. And it's really something that's now, the more I've looked into it, something that has become very close to my heart, which is the fact that it seems to be far more acceptable for a woman to go to a close friend and say, hey, I'm actually going through some things. And the way that women's relationships work with each other is they seem to kind of create this kind of safe space and nurturing space around them. Whereas I know even with my own friends, I can't think of a single time when I've actually gone up to them and said, how are you doing? Are you okay? How's your emotions? Is everything going okay? I now actively try to do that with some of my very close friends, knowing that it's uncomfortable because guys tend to rub it off and just say, oh, I'm fine. But no, let's, are you really fine? Are you okay? You can talk to me about it. And that's a very uncomfortable thing for men to do, just to be able to open up their emotions. And so when you don't have that, I'm very lucky that I have a handful of male friends that I can do that with. But if you didn't, what are your options?
Right.
And then you have to do something with those emotions. So I find substance abuse is really just numbing the difficult feelings that we're all going through.
I think it's also ingrained in us since we are kids. Boys are not allowed to cry.
Yeah.
Because kuriyan angu kyo ronne ho, right? They're
crying
told.
like a girl.
Exactly.
So that's such an attack on your masculinity that the very fact of expressing emotions is now seen as something that is alien for a male to do.
Right. When you started meditation and you started that it's having an effect and you've started to introspect, did you automatically, naturally learned that your faith and the wisdom from Sikhism is teaching you how to take care of yourself? Or was it, how was that transition? When did you realize that there's actually so much wisdom when it comes to mental well-being that's there? Because you talk about it often, but I wonder when that realization happened.
I tell you, the realization happened when I started to sit in meditation and start to notice moments of serenity, moments of peace, and started to notice, even in trying to meditate, anyone who's tried to meditate becomes very aware of the noise of their mind.
Right.
So I became aware of the fact that my mind constantly wants to say something, constantly wants to distract me with something, but there was also moments of peace. And it was only by doing some meditation and then starting to read the wisdom. I openly say for the first 20 years of my life, there was no teaching of wisdom.
What were
There
you
was
listening
religious
to?
practices, and that was it.
Right. What were you listening to when you were meditating?
I, more often than not, would do it in silence,
Okay, interesting.
and I would listen to my breathing. I would become aware of my breath. And then as that, I think we have to be clear on what we mean by meditation. And I think because sometimes it can just sound like a very complicated word. But really for me, it was just sitting with myself and just giving myself time to just figure out what's going on here. Let me see. And when you started to do that and start to find that there are times when your mind feels excited and agitated, and there are times when your mind can feel really calm, and just noticing the difference between the two and just going in and observing. It's like opening the door to a room that you didn't know that you had in the house and said, oh, wow, this is really interesting. I wonder what else is here.
Right.
That's what meditation became for me. And slowly over time, when I became comfortable with the quiet space within me, then you could start adding spiritual music, start adding kirtan, start adding chanting, mantras. And then it just resonated with me at a much deeper level, because you weren't then competing with the noise of the mind and spiritual music. You had learnt to put the noise of the mind to one side, and the spiritual music could really almost hit your heart a lot more.
Right. Isn't it interesting? I think I heard you say that when it comes to brushing our teeth, we are doing it regularly without making any excuses. We don't say, oh, I don't feel like brushing today, so I'm not going to brush my teeth. Why do we put meditation off? Maybe because we don't realize the value of it, or is it just intimidating and daunting?
I think it's a combination of both. My wife's a dentist, so we are very good at our brushing the teeth twice a day at home.
Flossing.
My children and everyone, we all do it, and we get told off if we don't. But I think the reason I bring that up is because my wife has helped us to understand what are the problems if you don't do it. This is what happens to your teeth. This is what happens to the mouth if you leave food in there overnight, things like that. And even as children, even if no one explains it to us, we do have a rough idea. You just smell your breath in the morning and you know, oh, there's a reason why I need to clean this. But with our mind, we don't notice the things that are happening. We don't notice the emotional baggage that seems to build up if we don't deal with it. And over time, we just write that off as our personality. Oh, this is who I am. Like it's somehow unchangeable. Whereas with our physical health, we know that you do good practices, you're going to somehow maintain and sustain yourself physically.
Right.
Mental health, we just never taught about those things at all.
I think it's also the tangible results that you see, right?
Yeah.
When you're taking care of yourself physically.
Yeah.
With mental health, if you're doing things for it, you don't just visibly see it.
Yeah.
You feel it.
You can start to feel it.
But you don't see it.
But I think it goes back to what you were saying about why we don't do it. The other bit is that it is actually difficult. It isn't that easy, and it can become uncomfortable.
Right.
Because all of a sudden you're sitting with yourself, and I know some people, as soon as they sit within meditation, all the things that they've suppressed now begin to surface. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, because you sit and you think, oh, I thought I dealt with that thing that happened 10 years ago. I thought I was done with it. But when you sit with yourself, it comes back up again. And you realize you hadn't dealt with it. You'd just left it alone for long enough that you forgot about it. But when you sit quietly with yourself, those things come up. And it is an uncomfortable process, especially if you've gone through any sort of difficulties or emotional trauma in your life. But that goes to show that you actually need to deal with it. It's still there.
Right.
You can't ignore it. It is going to resurface in one way or another, either in your personality or in your stress or in some other ways. Or, as we now know, it'll actually have a physical impact on your body as well.
Absolutely. I think that trauma, we just feel like we have suppressed it. We move on. We're strong enough. We keep going. My first experience with meditation was really powerful. I was visiting a friend, and she's extremely spiritual. And I truly believe that the space where you meditate regularly also becomes very sacred. So I felt this energy in that space. It was, I think, 4 of us. And she decided to do a meditation. And she just asked, she's like, has anybody meditated here before? Most of them had. I had never done it. I was open to it. We put some music on. We lit a candle. We started meditating. I had my eyes closed. And I don't even know, Satpal, but I was just crying. There were tears rolling down my eyes for about 15 minutes until the music stopped and everybody opened their eyes. And I had no idea what I had felt. I had no idea what was coming out, what emotions were these. I can't articulate it, but not sure why I felt how I did.
It's really interesting. That's probably one of the most common questions I get asked is when I sit to meditate, why do I cry? And what I've realized is there's only one of two reasons. Either, as we talked about, there are suppressed emotions that you haven't dealt with,
Right.
and those are coming out, or you're entering such a beautiful space within yourself, you cry because you know that that's actually what you've been craving your whole life, and nothing else outside seems to have delivered. And when you just begin to taste that within yourself, you're overwhelmed with emotion saying, this is all I've been looking for. This is what my life should have been about.
Right. You know, a lot of people find stillness as a way to meditate, sitting in silence. I am most at peace when I'm in the nature, when I'm walking, when I'm surrounded by trees, when I can hear the birds. There's a park I go to regularly for my walks, and sometimes I have Japji Sahib on in the morning, but I turn that off just to listen to the birds and the ducks.
Beautiful.
And the trees in the morning. So I sometimes wonder, is that the reason when I come home and I try to sit with myself, I'm not able to do it? Because I'm so in tuned with myself when I'm walking, actually.
I find that nature has a profound way of just quieting the mind naturally. If you go out and you're in some stunning scenery, you can't help but feel a sense of awe. You feel small and insignificant against this beautiful, large expanse of nature that you're in front of. There's a feeling of sacredness that, wow, this has been here for thousands of years. Who am I? I'm nobody in this. And you also find that right now, this is healing. I'm not lost in my thoughts and in my worries. Just being out here seems to help me deal with things.
Exactly.
And I always wonder about why we've, as a society, allowed ourselves to get so detached from nature, when you only have to go back into nature and realize there's a reason why they call it a mother.
Right.
It's like you're back in your mother's arms.
Ocean waves do that to me. I can sit by the water forever and just listen to the waves. Today was pouring rain. So I opened the window and I was standing by the rain and just closed my eyes and listening to the rain. There's certain sounds that do something to you. And I often wonder, the part that we are listening to, the Shabad we are listening to, I don't necessarily understand the meaning of those words that are coming, but somehow they're bringing me a peace of mind. Is it because we've been listening to it since we were kids and we're just sort of programmed that way? And we think psychologically it's bringing us peace, but we don't understand the true meaning of it. So why is it bringing us peace, or why are we feeling the way we're feeling?
I think there's undoubtedly a level of reverence that we have towards something that we've been taught from a young age, that this is something special. This was written by enlightened masters.
Right.
There's real deep spiritual wisdom. Your entire community is built around this. But now if you understood the language, the impact that it has is just untold, is unbelievable. And I always say to people, it's great that you're listening to something that you don't understand, but try and make the effort when you do understand, because it hits so hard. And sometimes it's harsh, some of the lessons that it's teaching you. Sometimes the poetry is so beautiful that everything that you wanted to express and couldn't do, somehow these poetic verses are doing it for you in a way that just brings you to tears. So I always say, it's great if you don't understand it, but if you do, it just takes it to a whole nother level.
It's incredible though, because it was written centuries ago and it's still having the same impact on our mind, body, spirit as it was meant to years ago.
I think the humans, we like to think that we've evolved a lot, but technologically we have, but our mind is pretty much the same as it's always been.
You know, you spoke about something last time you were here, and that was find inner peace. I would love to dwell on that. It's easier said than done, almost. Find inner peace. What does that mean? Could you elaborate? And how do we find inner peace in our day-to-day lives?
For me, inner peace is synonymous with acceptance. When we create conflict in our mind with the reality of life, that's where we start to create inner conflict. And you can't understand inner peace until you understand and accept and acknowledge your own inner conflict.
Could you give an example?
Every single day, I find that your mind, without you knowing, creates mini expectations. So let's say you are traveling to work and there's more traffic than usual. What you realize is your mind, without you actively doing it, your mind created an expectation that you were going to travel to work with the same level of traffic. And as soon as the reality is different to your expectation, that's when you experience inner conflict.
Right.
And when the spiritual wisdom talks about acceptance, what they're saying is, can you be comfortable with reality no matter what life is doing? And what we realize is there's a lovely formula that I like to think of. Your level of disappointment is related to how much your expectation deviates from the reality of life. You know, if you and I agreed to meet today to have this conversation, and you said be here by 7:30, if I turned up at 7:10, you might be a little bit annoyed at me. Okay, he's turned up too early. I told him 7:30. I'm not ready. If I turned up at 7:45, I'm now 15 minutes late. You'll be a little annoyed at me because I'm now a little bit late. But if I turned up at 8:30, now I'm an hour late. None of those things change the fact that the reality is what it is. I'm not saying that I was going to do that.
By the way, he was on time.
I was on time. Let me just specify. The thing is that you have created an expectation in your mind, and sometimes we need to in order to have a meeting, in order to agree certain things. But the reality in all those scenarios is the same. Something has happened, but your mind is not willing to sit with reality. Your mind is saying, no, I told you to come at a certain time, so you're sticking with your expectation. And you can extrapolate that for any scenario in life. And what you realize is expectation minus reality is going to determine how happy or how sad you are.
Right.
Your ability to accept reality is the factor. Acceptance is inner peace. You can't take away those two things.
So if, as a mother who's stressing out about sending the kids to school, going to work, also worried about what to make for lunch, who's going to pick up the kids? I do have a soccer game as well. By the way, I need to also call my friends. I have to go to the bank. I have to make these appointments. How am I finding inner peace?
Well, you should have some more help around the house as well, and maybe your husband should take some of the jobs off your hands as well. So that's a practical step that we all need. We all need help at times, and it's very easy to say yes to too many things and overload and burden yourself. So I think there's some sort of basic time management that we could all do with. And as a parent, it's very easy to put your family and your child's needs before your own. And sometimes you almost need to take a step back and say, right now, this is not good for me anymore. I always found that once I entered into the same space as you, where I was overly committing to things, ultimately it made me a worse father. Yeah. I thought that I was being a good dad by saying yes to this. And I had to realize that it was making me more stressed, and then I wasn't having quality time with my wife, with my children. So being able to self-regulate, to go back and say, in order for me to serve you, in order for me to be the best version of myself, I actually have to take care of myself so that I can be somebody who's taking care of you as well. That
was a hypothetical example.
That's a very real example for most of us.
But talking to women, I think you hear that a lot. And you do. You get... You're a caretaker. There is reverse parenting happening. You're taking care of your in-laws. You're taking care of your parents. You do forget about yourself. You have children. You have a husband. And you get lost. And women don't ask for help, usually. Yeah. You know how you were saying men don't express? Yeah. I think with women, we like to, and also I feel like because it's glorified, that women
Supermom.
Right?
Yeah.
The supermom and the things that I can do everything. I can be an ambitious woman and I can achieve all my goals and dreams, and yet I can balance a perfect domestic life. It's not reality. It is very hard.
It's not realistic at all.
Right.
And I think we are now slowly starting to realize that we've been oversold this idea of trying to achieve everything, being perfect in your home life, being perfect in your career, being perfect in your pursuit of your hobbies and your dreams and your passions. There is an imbalance there.
Right.
You are going to tip if you just carry too much weight like that. So it's sad to hear that women especially don't even feel that they can ask for help, and they feel like they have to say yes to everything. And for me, the barometer is always, how am I doing? And I think that's one of the most powerful questions that you can ask yourself. Just take a moment, and maybe meditation's a good opportunity to just at the end of every day say, how am I doing? Is this too much? It's an honest self-reflection moment. And maybe if you just took enough time at the end of every day to say, how am I doing? You might very quickly realize that I'm not doing so well, and I maybe need to slow some things down, or I maybe need to ask for help.
When you do have that self-reflection and you realize you're not doing well, I always wonder about the mind-body-spirit connection that Gurbani teaches us and Guru Granth Sahib teaches us. And I know they're interconnected, yet we're so off balance most of the time. Could you tell us what is the wisdom when it comes to mind, body, and spirit? What is the wisdom telling us?
Well, one of the most important lessons is that you are not disconnected from life. And I think most normal society teaches us that you are an independent being that is independent of nature and independent from life. And that is what the wisdom tells you is the beginning of mental health issues, is your sense of disconnection. But we give it nice names like I'm an independent, I have my own free will, I'm an independent thinker, I make my own decisions in life, all of those sorts of things, we sugarcoat them. And the reality is that your spirit is not your spirit, it's life's spirit. So number one, you are not disconnected from life. And as soon as you start to realize that connection, all of a sudden you feel whole. And mind, body, and spirit is nothing more than you trying to feel whole. And I think most of us would agree, if we were honest with ourselves, we wake up every day feeling empty.
Right.
And we spend the rest of our day trying to satisfy that feeling of emptiness and being incomplete and not good enough with other things. And the spiritual wisdom is saying, you don't actually have to do many other things in order to feel whole. You just have to connect mind, body, and spirit. You have to make that connection within yourself. Now, mind and body, we kind of know are intertwined, but we really don't know mind and spirit.
Right.
We don't know how to make that connection.
How do you make that connection?
Well, number one, you start to surround yourself with other people who know what they're doing. I always say this, if there was any skill that you want to learn, if you want to be successful in business, the number one advice is go and find a mentor. If you want to learn a musical instrument, go and find a teacher. Well, this is no different. If you want to have mental well-being, go and find the people in the world that are the most well in their mind. And that's a very tricky thing. If you ask yourself honestly, how many people do I know that are actually very full, complete, and mentally well?
Right.
You actually find that there aren't that many people that you know. Yeah. It's not the entrepreneurs and the most successful business people. Most of the time they're very stressed, although they're financially well. They may have a lot of wealth, but not in their mind.
Right.
So who has mental wealth? That's an interesting question. And what you find, for me, when I started to ask that question, I realized that the meditators and the spiritual masters were people who were mentally well. They were able to deal with life no matter what life threw at them.
Right.
So if you're going to make that connection between mind and spirit, go and find the right mentor.
I always find people are really skeptical to get help for mental health issues because one, they think it's too expensive. Not everybody can afford it. Plus, we've got way too much on our plate to take care of that part of us. Also, an observation, when a person has achieved everything in life, all the material goals, that's usually when they go on this path of spirituality. And I know very highly successful people who are now very connected and are mentoring other people. But every time I sit down with them, all I can think of is, okay, I got to pay this bill and I got to pay that bill. So maybe because they don't have to worry about any of that anymore, it's easier to sort of be spiritual, I wonder.
I wonder whether the people who became financially successful, materially rich, went on that spiritual path because when they got to the point where they no longer needed to buy much more, they realized it still didn't fill their happiness void. And that's a really difficult place to be because you realize I've actually bought everything. I have the private jet. I have the 2 or 3 mansions. I have all the cars that I want, but I'm still not happy. That's why I think they go down that route, because they realize that they've spent all of their time getting things that they thought would make them feel happy. And when they're there, they realize that the happiness bit hasn't still been filled. But I think it's a valid point that they might have a lot of time to go and then learn that spirituality. But I don't think this needs to be something that's expensive. If anything, going back to some of the real ancient wisdom that's out there, there's never been a charge for that.
Right. And you don't have to go to a mountain
Definitely not.
to feel the peace.
I think in today's day and age, we're very lucky that you actually have access to everything
We do.
in your pocket.
But that could also be a bad thing because we don't know what to choose anymore. There's apps, there is websites, there is people who are sharing wisdom, and there's almost like too much information you're bombarded by.
You get an overload.
My algorithm is all about self-help and self-care, and it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. Yeah.
That's why I always say, have a real think about who are the people who have stood the test of time. Some of these new age spirituality gurus, they come and go. They charge a lot of fees for their services. So I always say, who's tried and tested? Who's been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and their wisdom still works? That's a really good way to assess whether something is genuinely going to be good. So that's a nice way to filter it down. Whose ultimate goal is it to charge you money for their time and services, as opposed to who's giving it away freely out of the goodness of their heart?
Right.
So maybe a good way to decide which ones you want to follow.
I've heard the concept of home a lot, which we did touch on, ego and self-centeredness. I feel like almost everybody's so self-consumed these days. You are pretty much your biggest marketing person. You're promoting yourself constantly. You're selling yourself constantly.
Yeah, the personal brand has become the big thing these days.
It has. So how do you not become self-centered? How do you put the home aside?
I think there's always a balance. You have to be in the world. You have to play the game. But for me, you don't have to necessarily believe it. And I know that's different for different people. Like, when you look at these athletes, for example, in order for them to really succeed, there's an insane level of self-belief. I am the best. I'm the one that's going to beat the opposition. And in order to get to that ultimate level, they have to have that. But that's not what we're measuring our success against. We're not measuring whether we are the most competitive. The conversation that we're having is which is the path that's going to lead us to be the most mentally well. And again, the most financially successful, the ones with the biggest fame, aren't necessarily the ones that are mentally well. So you have to be willing to drown out the noise of society that's telling you that you're only successful if you are financially wealthy, if you are materially successful, if you have reached the peak of your career. That's the stuff that our society is telling us. If you have the perfect home, the perfect family life, the great cars parked in front of the designer home, are those the measures? And for most of us, we've been sold this so many times that we do believe that that's what it is. you have to be willing to say no to some of those things for your personal mental well-being.
Right.
And that always comes back to, do you actually know your mental well-being? Do you know your inner state? If you don't, you're going to listen to everybody else because everyone else is going to tell you.
Right.
You know, it's one of the things I tell my children. They ask me the question all the time, what should I be, Dad, when I grow up? And I never had this as an opportunity said to me. And I always say to them, I really genuinely want you to be happy when you grow up. Because to me, the answer was always, you're going to succeed in a career. Pick a good career, the one that pays a lot of money. And I understand where that came from, especially from immigrant parents.
Absolutely.
They came with nothing. They've seen what it's like with absolutely nothing. So for them to get your children educated and set in a career was the only thing. And that's what we were told. Unfortunately, we went down that route and we realized that we were financially stable and we had good careers. But that's when the mental health issues started coming in.
Right.
I genuinely say to my kids, I really want you to be happy when you grow up. I don't really care what you do. And maybe you don't need to look at your financial success or your career success as the benchmark for whether you're okay. Because you could do that, then you're going to make the same mistakes that we made. And we realized only in our 30s and 40s that we weren't doing so well internally.
Happiness is so subjective too, though, right? What makes you happy doesn't make me happy either. So what is it that we are searching for when you say be happy?
Well, I say inner peace. And I don't think inner peace is subjective. I think when you feel peaceful, it feels the same as when I feel peaceful.
Right.
Whereas there could be other things that make you happy. You could be happy more with your career. I could be more happy with my family. Two different things. But peace is the same for both you and me.
Right.
And even that, there could be different things that lead you to that peace. And that's why I actually don't think it matters how you find inner peace. If it might be for me sitting in meditation and listening to meditative music, and for you it's going out in nature, great. Do that. Do anything that brings you to that state of inner peace.
Right. A lot of people find inner peace in seva as well. I know concept of seva it's one of the philosophies of Sikhism, and we've been taught to do seva. But I see the other side as well. I see when we're doing seva, that's also for our home, because now we're taking pictures of the seva that we're doing and we're putting them out there for people to see. And we need validation that, look, I'm a good person. I give back. I'm paying it forward. Who are we fooling?
I think that invalidates it.
Right.
When we talk about seva, the more accurate translation of that is selfless service. And if there's any part of it which is self-gratifying or trying to show that you're doing something good or even trying to make yourself feel good, then you're serving yourself first. And that's, again, something about being honest with yourself and saying, am I serving myself? Is there really anything that I can do that is purely selfless? Can I do it without telling anyone? Can I do it without posting on social media about it? It's so easy to do that these days. But really, you should ask yourself, have an honest conversation. What am I hoping to gain when I post it online? Is it the likes? Do I really just want to have that little bit of kind of joy that I get from making other people know that I've done something good? Then all of a sudden, the entire reason, the purpose that you were going to serve someone else now becomes about your ego again, your self-importance.
Right. Chardi kala, that is something that I hear a lot as well. Ki chardi kala ch raho. So what does it mean?
For me, it's actually a very powerful psychology. And the word chardi kala means rising spirits or high spirits. And it came about during the times of battle, that even when all seemed to be lost, if you asked one of the warriors, how are you doing? The answer was always, I'm in high spirits. And it's a type of mental resilience. If you know how to use that term, it's a term of mental resilience. And it literally means there's nothing that the world can do that can stop this state of high spirits that I'm in. And once you practice it rather than just being a standard response that you have to give, you can actually practice. It's a self-reminder. Don't let yourself get emotionally drowned. Lift yourself up. No matter what's going on the outside, you can remain detached in your mind from the circumstances of life. And it's actually a really powerful tool.
Right. You know, it's with trauma, there's so many different types of trauma everybody has gone through. But I feel like there's a collective trauma that the Sikhs have gone through with our history. And that generational trauma is something that weighs us down constantly as well. And that comes up. And generational trauma is a term that I've been hearing lately a lot more. So maybe we're just a lot more aware that, and I got to see that, the impact of the generational trauma. My Nani ji passed away a few months ago. And during the partition, like other people, she shifted with her family, which is now Pakistan, to India. She lost her mother during partition, and her siblings moved to India. And somehow the conversations would be surface level. We would hear about it when she was aware. Then she suffered Alzheimer's. In the last stages, she kept talking about bodies floating in the water. And I think that made me realize that the impact that she had 70 years ago is what she's talking about.
As a child. She would have been a child at the time.
As a child. So that generational trauma, I guess we all carrying a pain, some sort of pain in ourselves. 1984 left a huge impact on a lot of people. So somewhere we all impacted by it, whether some more than others maybe, and how we've dealt with it, I don't know. Or have we dealt with it?
I wonder if you can ever deal with things that are so catastrophic that you see so much pain and destruction around you. You know, anyone that goes through war or societal breakdown in some way, I wonder if you can ever deal with it. And almost the question I would ask you is, did your grandmother demonstrate that it was actually a trauma, or did she actually find a way to get on with life? Was it actually weighing her down? Do you remember her bringing it up often, or did it actually become something that she went through, but she was still resilient enough to kind of carry on with life?
She was very resilient, and she wore the pants in the house, and she was type A personality. So she was the strongest woman I've ever known. She was a working woman. She was a teacher all her life.
So is it really a trauma then?
So I almost wonder that the reason it came out in the last stage of her life the way it did, and how she would tremble when she would think about it, is because she suppressed it all these years. So if there was help available when it was needed, maybe it wouldn't have come out in such a devastating way. And she was one of those women who didn't show her tears in public. So she would probably, I'm sure she was crying when nobody was watching her. But that doesn't mean the trauma wasn't there.
Yeah.
I think because she didn't have any control over her memory and emotions, in the end, it was coming out.
That's where it resurfaced.
Right?
For me, there's something about the fact that our ancestors have gone through so much worse than we could ever imagine. You know, I think you and I probably live quite comfortable lives compared to our grandparents' lives. And yet they were so much stronger than probably even we are. Yeah. Maybe those things make you stronger in ways that comfort and luxury don't. And I feel like as a generation, we're talking a lot more about our mental health. And yet I can almost imagine our grandparents saying, what are you talking about? What are you going through that compares to what we went through? And yet we were in Chardikala. We found a way to just plow on through it. And there was some sort of mental strength that they had that maybe we need to take a leaf out of their book.
Right. I sometimes wonder if we are sheltering our children from any struggles and any challenges of real life. I almost feel like they're not street smart enough. I feel like they're not playing outside enough. Yeah. They're not seeing the real world enough, and they're just too sheltered.
Yeah. They get picked up and dropped off from school.
Yeah.
You never really go for a walk.
Yeah.
Even when they do, we can track them on our apps. We know exactly where they are. They can call us at all moments. Yeah, I've worried about that myself.
Right. And yet I see the generation in their 20s. I don't even know what they're called now. Gen Z. I don't know.
I never know.
Talk about generational trauma more than any one of us, and how their life goes off balance if they've got too much on their plate, and how meditation is a priority for them. how taking care of themselves is a priority for them. Self-care is very, very important. It's on top of the list.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing.
I think so
Ultimately,
too.
we can't swing from saying that we need to look after our mental health, but then we should also be like our grandparents where we never talked about it and we just got on with it. I think there's a middle ground somewhere. And maybe human society naturally just goes from very difficult scenarios where we just dealt with it to actually when times are good, but we're now more aware of our mental health and maybe it's cyclical.
Right.
Who knows?
Have you ever, because I know you do a lot of seminars and talks and workshops, have you ever had a person who was very skeptical about changing their mental health around through meditation, through the wisdom, and then they finally reached a point where they believed in it?
Yeah, I've definitely come across people who at first they just hear everything that I talk about as almost flowery language. It sounds good, but it doesn't really work for me. Oh, I've tried meditation. It doesn't work for me. It might work for other people, but it doesn't work for me. And I always think that people need to be ready. There needs to be a point in their life where they themselves think, actually, I'm going to give it a go. And we can't determine whether somebody's going to be ready or not. And you've probably noticed this just with other friends. Sometimes somebody just wants to have a shoulder to cry on and they don't want you to give any advice to them because they're just not ready to take on that advice at that point. And it's not really for us to judge. We just have to be there when they need us to be. And that's to some extent how I've now become comfortable with the work that I do is I don't know who's out there ready to hear it.
Right.
And when they're ready, I hope that they will take some of this advice. I hope that they will use something that I've learned through my own experience and maybe they can use it in their life. The ones that do really do change their life.
Do you have any examples, like real life examples of somebody? I know we talked about addiction and somebody beat addiction.
Yeah.
Because they realize that their body is really not theirs.
Yeah. There are so many examples that I've heard from people who are dealing with real grief, loss, people who themselves are going through medical conditions, cancer. And time again, people say, when I was going through it, that's when I found your work. And your work helped me through. Your teachings helped me. And I've heard it in so many different scenarios. And I sometimes question, how come I'm saying the same thing, but people from many different circumstances seem to be benefiting from it? And it's because I realize that it's this timeless wisdom. It's been written by these masters hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And they really did know what they were talking about when it came to the human spirit and the human mind.
What if somebody doesn't believe in God? Can they be spiritual as well? Can they meditate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think God has become one of those words that in modern society we've just learned to reject. And as we become more scientifically aware, as we understand what the universe is really made of, we don't really understand where this God thing is. And so part of the work that I do is I actively encourage you to stop using the word God. I don't want you to find God. I don't want you to connect with God. What I say is, let's talk about life. Is life a part of you? You say yes. Are you inside life? Say yes. Okay, well, you can just connect with life. For some people, even the word Mother Nature is perfectly good enough. Now, when I use the word Mother Nature, nobody actually thinks there's a woman sitting up there. You understand that nature has a mothering quality. And that's how I think of the word God. I don't actually think there's somebody sitting up there. I'm understanding that life has the personality of a creator, a sustainer, a destroyer. Right. It's not a person. Yeah. It's the flavor, just like Mother Nature isn't a person.
A follow-up question. A lot of people have had very traumatic experiences thanks to people who have harmed them, harassed them, sexually abused them, who represented a faith. And those people would probably never be able to look at the wisdom through the same lens as a normal person might. How do we get those people back aligned with the wisdom?
Unfortunately, we've seen that far too many times, especially when someone looks religious or represents a faith in some way and they've betrayed you, young children, young women, young men. It is very difficult for them to now not see what that person did as somehow an indicator of that faith. Well, if they believed in that religion and they could still do those things, then maybe that religion itself is wrong. And I find more often than not, those people are the ones that completely go away from religion and start to look for help elsewhere, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to say, I don't believe in God, I don't agree with religion, but it doesn't solve the fact that they still need healing. They just go and look in other places. And I think there's so many different options available to you these days through yoga, through meditation apps, through mindfulness. There's so many different options. I would rather people do something than to walk away from any sort of mental healing. So for some people, religion and structure and ancient connection might not be the right way. And I don't think it's for us to judge them.
It's a trigger for a lot of people.
It is.
I've seen. Mindfulness. I hear that word a lot too. What does that mean?
It's interesting. The word mindfulness is a modern term for actually ancient Buddhist wisdom of Buddhism. And if you look at the translation or the meaning of mindfulness, it's observing your thoughts and not placing any judgment on them. So looking at whatever emotions you're experiencing, not trying to deal with it, not trying to overcome it in some way, but just being aware of it. And through that practice, you can start to create a distance between you and your mind. It's a very powerful technique.
Yeah. So it's different than being able to control your thoughts, because I hear you can control your
That's
thoughts.
Right. Mindfulness is being mindful and aware of whatever is happening in your mind, but not getting drawn into it, watching it and almost letting it float away like a cloud.
Are you doing mindfulness as you're living your life?
Absolutely. As you're walking around, as you're doing your day-to-day jobs, as you're driving to work, you start by having a formal practice where you sit and you observe your mind, a type of meditation. But the whole point is that you become a little bit more familiar when your mind does things. And you realize, oh, my mind is doing that again. So when you're going about your day-to-day life and feelings of stress come up, feelings of anger come up, you start to become aware, oh, I'm not angry. Anger is now coming. And you create a little bit of distance between me and the emotion that I'm feeling. So that's what mindfulness is trying to do.
How have you been able to control your reflexes and how you react to situations, how you respond to things over the years through meditation? I'm just curious.
What I think meditation has done for me is it's allowed me to know what peace feels like.
What does it feel like? In one word.
Sunbathing.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
As soon as I say the term sunbathing, you know what it is. You are simply lying there and enjoying it without trying too hard. That's what, for me, inner peace feels like.
You'd mentioned that unconsciously all of us are meditating all the time. What does that mean? Could you elaborate on that?
So we talked about mindfulness, but there are other techniques. Mindfulness is watching your mind. The technique that Guru Nanak uses is to recognize that your mind is always chattering. And that what I say is your mind is always meditating. It's always got something to say. And most of the time, it's meditating on yourself, on me, my problems. I need to do this. I need to do that. You'll notice that when you wake up in the morning, the me thinking starts. I'm late for this. Are the kids going to get ready on time? I need to do this. Do I answer my emails? All of those things. The me thinking keeps going all the time. So your mantra meditation is what your mind is already doing. And people who are aware of the function of their mind then say, actually, if your mind is going to do that anyway, why don't you just swap out the word? Because that's causing you a lot of tension and stress. Whereas if you use gratitude, thank you, connectivity with life, if you start to replace the words in your mind through mantra meditation, which is distinct from mindfulness, you notice that it allows you to get on with your life, but you're just retuning the radio station to a different frequency.
Living with gratitude is also something that we hear a lot. Shukrana is something that we've been taught. But I feel like we don't do it enough because we're always wanting more and we're always asking. I think the only time most of us think of God is when we are going through something really bad and terrible and we don't have a way out. And that's when I've seen atheists turn into God-fearing men because there is a higher power that they all of a sudden realize might be doing what it's doing.
And it's probably one of the most impactful things that I've noticed in my life is just taking time. If you can't do any meditation, if you can't do anything else, literally just think of 10 things that you're grateful for in your life. And you'll notice that that's not what your mind naturally does. Your mind naturally thinks about something that's missing. I haven't done this yet. I'm late for this. I need to do that. Your mind automatically seems to go into what's missing. And that actually goes back to what your heart is really looking for, is to feel whole. And what your mind tries to do is to remind you of all the things that are missing. And maybe if you do all those things, then you'll feel whole. But anyone who's tried that realizes that the mind's wish list never ends. Gratitude is recognizing that you always have something to do, but let's actually feel whole now. How do you feel whole now? Just list 10 things that you're grateful for at any moment. Very powerful to do at the beginning of the day, as soon as you wake up, at the end of the day. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I have a comfortable bed to sleep in. I'm grateful that my family around me are okay. I had a nice meal. I have a warm bed. I have a healthy body. That's already 5 or 6 things. And once you start to do that, you realize I have so much. I'm so blessed. And yet my mind is getting stressed about this one thing that is still outstanding. There's always going to be things that are outstanding.
Right.
But you have so much more than you realize. And there's a beautiful phrase that I heard once. My blessings are bigger than my problems. Just repeat that to yourself.
Beautiful. There is this epidemic I was reading about, loneliness, especially after the pandemic. It's not even physical loneliness. It's the emptiness and the loneliness when you are even surrounded by people, which is completely, it's a contradiction if you think about it, because we feel like we're so connected. Yet we're so lonely. Why are we feeling lonely? Why is there a disconnect?
I think social media, which we touched upon last time, has something to do with that as well. But you can be around lots of people, but don't actually make real connections. And one of the things that you learn as you grow older is lots of friends isn't what you need. You need a handful of really close friends. Close connections, you can find that you can sit with your best friend for hours, whereas in a crowd, making small talk, you're done with it after a couple of minutes.
Drains me personally.
So real connection, real heart to heart, real one-to-ones is what you're really craving. And these are simple things, really, when you think about them. They're not complicated. But somehow we've gotten lost in society telling us all the real measures of success. But actually you realize that they're a lot more simple.
Right. If somebody is going through darkness and they don't see light at the end of the tunnel, that could be because of a life-threatening disease. It could be because of a mental illness. It could be grief. If they wanted to get back up on their feet, what are some practical techniques to start now you would like to tell them about?
One of the most powerful techniques I've found is learning a way to switch off your suffering. And I use the example that, when you are upset about something and the doorbell rings or the phone rings, what do? You immediately switch it off and you go, because you have to answer the door, you put on a brave face and you have the ability to immediately interrupt the negative thoughts that you were going through. So we all have that ability. If you realize that you can do that even if nobody's ringing the doorbell, and recognize whatever you're going through, you don't have to dwell on it. And most people don't know that. So if they feel angry, they don't recognize the emotion of anger. They're just focusing on the person who's made them angry or the situation that's made them angry. If you're feeling sad because something has not gone right in your life, you didn't get the promotion, you didn't get the job, whatever it was, something was missing, you were expecting it and it didn't happen, you're not thinking of your emotion and recognizing, oh, I'm feeling this. You're just focusing on the things. Like somehow the outside object is the reason of your emotion. And I always say, your response is your responsibility. No matter what happens on the outside, your emotional state is yours. Nobody has ever had the ability to make you sad or make you angry. People did things, and then you chose anger as a response. Now, people will listen to that and say, well, I didn't choose that. We don't choose these emotions. Yes, you do. Every single time it comes up, you are participating in that. You are allowing that to be the case. And because we don't know the difference between ourselves and our minds, we think that our first response is our only response.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And we have the ability to interrupt that instinctive response. And again, you do that by starting to learn what inner peace feels like, know what it feels like, so that when frustration comes, you now have two states of mind. And you think, I know I'm feeling angry. Have you ever had this where you're so angry at someone and you know that you're being angry? You can see that you're being angry, but you just have to, you've started it, so you have to just carry it, see it through. Right. That's kind of what meditation does, where you can see yourself having the emotional response, but you know, I don't have to be there. I know how to jump out of that train of thought and come back into my stillness.
Right.
That needs practice.
I think 21 days is what it takes to form a habit.
Yeah, in Indian culture, it says 40 days.
40 days.
Do something for 40 days. People used to fast for a certain amount of days. People used to do certain things, certain practices and rituals, and it was always 40 days. And the psychology now is understanding that's the amount of time that it takes to actually create a habit. But it could be 21 if you're really advanced.
So do it for how long? If somebody wants to start meditation tomorrow, how long do
I always say, people say, I don't have time for meditation. I say there's 2 times in the day when you can meditate. 5 minutes before you get out of bed and 5 minutes before you go to sleep. Start small. Otherwise, we use terms like meditation and you think, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do.
I don't know where to sit.
It sounds complicated.
Yeah.
And I say, get into bed.
Right.
And everyone has 5 minutes. Put your phone down and take 5 minutes to do that. And if you don't have 5 minutes when you wake up in the morning, set your alarm 5 minutes early.
Beautiful. I'm so inspired as always, Satpal. What a privilege to have you in the studio again.
Oh,
so,
thank you.
Thank you. This was a beautiful conversation. I think we're going to keep the doors open for you every time you're here in Vancouver.
I would love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.